Hello everyone, this is Thomas B. So, is immersive theater the future of LARP? First we're going to start with one participant's perspective. Particularly a LARPer's perspective. I've been mostly a player and an organizer since 1996. I've been a sort of a lazy larpwright and a reviewer since 1997. I've LARPed in many countries and languages and in various styles, from the big buffer LARPs to things that are more experimental. And it's been pretty a happy experience, except over the past few years there's been various real life issues that really took away my time to prep and to travel, and that became a real problem. So the reaction of the media and younger people sounded a bit like, okay, LARPer, well, you should try this new and cool thing called immersive experiences. Yeah, because we don't actually say immersive theater anymore, it's newer now. So the offer was I could get something that was shorter than a lot of LARPs, that was more local. I could just show up and immerse. There would be no prep, no workshops, no pre-play, but I could still get pretty sights and costumes. So not only ugly classrooms and tape LARPs. So, and I could do that without actually having to return to passive art, and I could do it with non-LARPers like family members. Wow, so that sounded great. So I tried about a bit more than 20 immersive experiences in 5 countries over the past years. First, we're going to stop studying immersion because really it's nothing new. Thank you to Matthijs Walter and the book Lifelike in 2007, but seriously, stop. Why? Well, because it's not a helpful word to describe these actual experiences. What immersion are you looking for? Are you looking to immerse in a different physical world? So that's the actual sense of presence, of being present somewhere else. Do you want to immerse in a task or a challenge? And that sounds more like flow. Do you want to be immersed in a story? Narrative transportation, you can have that with a book. You don't need a LARP or theater for that. Or you could be immersed in a character, like the famous Eläytyminen of our Finnish immersionist friends. But what about inter-immersion, group co-creation? You're going to do something social here. Well, let's see what they had to offer. According to the internet, if you start Googling things like immersive experiences, you're going to get something about an illusionary environment that completely surrounds you so that you feel that you are inside it and part of it. Yes, that really sounds like presence. Problem is they add stuff like technology, augmented reality, or mixed reality. I'm not interested in that. I want something big, I want something physical, I want something social. So visually, the best way to get immersed with our eyes, I went to the Immersive Art Festival. How much LARP do you think there was at the Immersive Art Festival? Nothing. What you had was projections on walls. That's right. If you want to experience absolute immersion, according to many people, it's about projecting things. So when the entire room becomes a screen and you're in the middle, at best you are indeed, it's fucking with your perceptions. That's pretty cool. At worst, you end up with some sort of glorified PowerPoint with people trying to take photos with flash. I mean, it's a pretty horrendous experience. It's visually immersive, but as an experience, probably not related for LARPers. Now, LARPers want interaction. So there you go. TeamLab from Japan came to Paris and did this huge installation exhibit where you had a sense of physical presence with these giant projections, but they were actually interactive. So you can see me here on the right, basically diverting the flow of water in a virtual waterfall with rose petals flying in the air. So it's more like an immersive installation sold as an experience, fine. But that's it, there's no story, there's no characters. Really cool environment, maybe not what you're looking for. So I wanted something more gamey, more active. Went to the Assassin's Creed experience. So this is amazing sites. So the Napoleon's tomb, the Invalides Museum, gigantic military ground. So good luck getting that for your LARP site. There were some costume NPCs or game masters in robes. There was some buggy augmented reality because we're supposed to look for clues and go from point A to point B and find the secret code word at the end. So these types of game that are sold as immersive experiences are actually glorified escape games or treasure hunts. They're in cool locations, they're visually pretty cool, but at the end of the day, you're just trying to collect stuff to find the clue. Now, some people try to increase the LARP content of these things, like the Affair of the Poisons in Paris. This is actually at the Château de Vincennes, again an amazing site and again a military ground, so good luck getting it. That has been used in the past as a prison, including the Marquis de Sade. They did not focus on that, they focused on the Poison Affair, which is a different French historical period. But basically what the experience consisting in is that walking around the castle, and the organizers would stick clues at various points, ciphers, things to be decoded, but again, more of a glorified escape game treasure hunt. They tried to give us player characters, a lot of info dumping on the backstory, but those characters had no actual meaningful connections. There was no reason to play characters. There was no role play. So you're sort of trying to solve an escape game while saying, oh yeah, I'm the descendant of the Marquis of blah, but nobody cares. Plus the game design was pretty poor. So again, it's not because you have a cool location, you're actually physically present, and you have tasks to do, that the tasks are going to be exciting, or that you're really going to have this immersion in character at all. Now, if you want true characters and art, an example was Musica Palazzo in Venice. So you go again in an actual place, in that case, a Venetian palace, and you have people playing like Figaro's Wedding or La Traviata in costume in a giant apartment, and you're seated in the rooms and people are next to you and sing next to you. Pretty, visually and sensory point of view immersive, but it's passive art. So people call it basically promenade theater, where you go from point A to point B physically, but you're just listening to artists performing. Now, well, if you keep that, but you add a bit more interaction, well, that could be the Fêtes galantes in Versailles, yes, the Palace of Versailles, where you can see various shows, singing, dancing. You can actually participate in the ball, in the Hall of Mirrors. You can play historical games, and you have to show up in costume. So you don't have to role play, you can. There are some characters that actually interact, some sort of NPCs. And it's not really historical reenactments because like people make selfies, and so there's no overarching story. You can have like snippets of role playing. It's a pretty cool event, magnificent fireworks at the end. And it's not even called immersive, but it's pretty damn immersive. Now, I don't know if that's what you're looking for. If you're looking for something really designed as immersive, with an actual story, an actual vision, a story arc, well, maybe go for Sleep No More. It's one of the most famous immersive theater pieces, ran in New York these days, but also now syndicated to other places. It's mostly dance-based, non-verbal Macbeth meets Hitchcock. So pretty cool 1930s aesthetic, giant scenery, 5 levels, scenography, props, and it's a looping story, so if you stay long in that experience, you can see various parts because it's too big to see everything at the same time. The audience, as you can see in the background, is masked. So you don't matter. You're in the background. You are anonymized. And if you want to follow the story, in LARP sometimes we talk about chasing the plot train, like trying to latch on to the story to sort of make sense of it, something you don't have to do in regular theater. Well, in immersive theater, or in the case of Sleep No More, you have to physically chase it because the actors move really fast across the stage, and you have to chase them. And because there's a lot of people, you sometimes you get shoved on the side, or you have to push people a bit just to try and make sense of what's happening. So you physically have to run through the entire place. So it's not about like, begging for plot. It's literally physically chasing the plot. Every now and then, the actors can pick you if they want for a one-to-one, more intimate scene. It can be pretty impressive, but it's gonna be like a few seconds or minutes out of your entire hours of experience. So you're really lost in the crowd. At the opposite of the intimacy spectrum, you have then Gifel. Also in New York, this is more like Alice in Wonderland meets psychiatric ward. Again, a multi-level set, not as big as Sleep No More, but pretty large. There you're a small group, like 15 people, and then you're split into smaller groups, and you're literally handheld onto the plot train. Like people take you from point A to point B, from room to room, and so you get many small interactions, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes creepy, sometimes touching. Still a lot of dance-based narrative, very limited dialogue, or very limited agency. It's railroaded to the hilt. So what if you want more wording, more role play, more like real life stuff? Well, obviously you come to France because we love talking. So Smoke Rings was one of the first French immersive theater pieces that basically adapted short theater skits about couples and relationships into an immersive experience. So it's very verbal. People talk all the time. And the audience either is a regular theater audience or sometimes is invited to play the crowd, the relatives of the characters or dancers at a party or karaoke singers. It's still fully railroaded, so you don't have a choice of who you're playing. You're literally taken from point A to point B. But you go through the entire theater, so you explore everything from the changing rooms to the backstage. It's really sort of promenade plus. You're taken everywhere. You don't have a choice as to where you're going, and sometimes you're sort of the extras in the play. What's funny is that over time, they try to make it more interactive. So the same company, la Compagnie du Libre Acteur, created Cyrano, Ostinato, Fantaisies, where there the theme is that you watch a troupe rehearsing the French play Cyrano de Bergerac, and you as an audience member play the role of theater students. So it's mostly railroaded through the theater building. Again, they take you from point A to point B, but at least you have a reason to be there. You're a theater student. And there's more and more interaction as the evening progresses and becomes weirder and weirder. So at the beginning, you just shut up and listen. And after a while, you can start engaging and actually having sort of freestyle discussions with the actors. But because, in a way, theater actors are so used to passive audiences and confused audiences, then they're sometimes a bit surprised when you actually role play with them. And it was not only in this particular immersive theater. Very often when you propose something, there's no play to lift, there's no bouncing off your ideas. It takes a while before they warm up to the idea that yes, participants could actually participate. So there's really the question of whether LARP is actually the future of immersive theater. They don't want to do promenade theater. So if you think of a participant agency fader on a hypothetical mixing desk of art, the least participation is classical theater. You shut up, you clap, you sit down, you laugh. And LARP, where you fully co-create. So immersive theater is really going to depend on each production how much participant agency there actually is. And the most I've experienced is actually recently in Paris, in the Lost Generation, which was sold as an immersive party in 1920s Paris. So you had to bring your own costume, and the actors played famous artists of the time that were hanging out at the time, and the audience plays their guests. And now, when you sign up, you decide how much of an interaction you want with the actors. So you could be a close friend, and in that case, they will call you out and interact. It still took them a bit to warm up to the idea that, yes, we're not the famous celebrities from the 20s, but we still wanted to interact. So I ended up LARPing. I basically spent an entire evening LARPing with the actors and sometimes with the participants. But I paid. I was a paying audience member, while the actors were paid. So that part was kind of weird. Overall, another issue that we need to keep in mind about this whole experience is there's issues about informed consent. So the Lost Generation was the only experience that provided clear rules about like arm-only touching, about verbal abuse, what was okay, what was not okay. Most other productions, they love playing with separating you from your partner, about taking your phone and locking it away, an unclear magic circle, so you don't know whether the experience has started or not. And it's often told last minute by email or just even without warning. So it really feels in many ways a sort of 1990s edgy LARPers. Oh, we don't know if it's a game or if it's not a game. So the issue of safety is really a problem sometimes. And people talk about the safety of the actors, but I'm talking about the safety of the participants here. Because even when there's rules, for example, in the Lost Generation, participants' breasts ended up being touched without her consent. I was slammed against a wall during one of the fights between two of the actors. So, two of the victims, if you want, are not traumatized. It's fine. We went through it. But that shows that even when there's actual rules, sometimes they're not really actually followed. So, is immersive theater the future of LARP? Well, if you into equalitarian co-creation or long campaign trips outside, no, keep LARPing. Immersive theater cannot really help you with that. However, if you value short, intense, visually impressive 360 experiences and some roleplay, then yeah, maybe. Gotta be careful. The level of interaction and actual roleplay could be from 0 to quite a bit. What I really see as a trend is if immersive theater keeps improving at co-opting stuff from LARP, like characters or agency, but never calling it LARP, then yeah, it may actually happen. It's happening in France right now, where there's an escape game with many actors and an actual story and a big site, and they call that a deep game. It really looks like a LARP, but they're not using the term. So that was all from me on the participants' end. I think now it's time to hear about the designer's perspective from Madame Lupin, who created The Lost Generation, and I'll join you in the comments. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you Thomas for inviting us on this talk. We are happy to share today with you our creation process and methodology for our immersive show The Lost Generation. I'm Mélanie Dorey, I'm the founder and creative director of Madame Lupin. I'm specialized in artistic direction and immersive writing, and my background is in art history and cinema.
And I'm Michael Freudenthal. I'm a game designer and I'm specialized in participation design and education. And I'm soon to be a PhD student about LARP and informal learning.
Okay. Let's move to slide 2. So today we'll see shortly in a 15-minute talk the storyline of Madame Lupin. What is the Lost Generation, our production process, and then the creative direction. This talk will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A in the chat and in the comments, so if you want to stay with us after, that's great. So Madame Lupin was founded 5 years ago. We began by doing trespassing art experiences in abandoned places, with site-specific art installation, from the catacombs to an abandoned museum to private apartments, and then we shifted towards participatory theatrical experiences. The Lost Generation is the result of 5 years of theories, tests, experimentations at crossroads of many art forms, and this show is actually a duo collaboration with Michael. So what is The Lost Generation? So The Lost Generation is an immersive theatrical party set in 1925 where participants are invited to live one night with renowned artists of the Roaring Twenties. It's set in a historical location, a former Belle Epoque brothel in the heart of Paris. That is an incredible venue to do a show in. So you have a 360-degree story designed for 55 participants where narrative arcs are unfolding around you and with you during the show, and endings are changed by participants' influence. The underlying theme is mostly about femininity and masculinity through conversations about artistic creation, imposter syndrome, abusive relationships, and closeted queerness. The story, portrayed by the characters' relationships to each other and to the participants, is about identity, affirmation, and acceptance. So how did we manage to give birth to this project? Let's go to the production process overview. So this process is running over 7 months from original concept to showtime. You have two kind of icons. It's either written tools or training with the guest. So to start with aesthetic vision, so first there was the original concept. That was the red thread for all the creation and production process. This is a very small design document that came from conversation. Then after, once we had that concept, we did a lot of research about that period. The Roaring Twenties, that is often portrayed as very festive and extravagant. But what we wanted to show is that it's also about a generation traumatized by war, by huge instability and a lack in faith of the future. For the casting, because of the interactivity of the show, we were looking for a mix between acting and interacting, with a mix of classic actors, improv people, and larpers. So once we had that, we worked on the play concept. We aimed towards interaction from the start, and so we reversed the classical theater script writing by creating at first a macro design of the narrative arcs for the whole play, and then character arcs, and then scenes, and then dialogues. Having this first material, we could make workshops inspired by classical theaters, improv, LARP, and with always interaction embedded in. Then we had the script. So during the training process with the actors, we were able to discuss the themes of the play with them, and we actually wrote the script for them and with them. So this was a very, very grateful way to work with them. What we learned during the process is that the script is actually a canvas for people to play with the story and with the actors. It's not a sacralized text like in classical theater that has absolutely to be respected. It's just a canvas for everyone to have fun with and to grow from. So all the rehearsals and work allowed us to do what we call plateau writing. Sorry if that's not the right word in English. You can just tell us what it is. What we call plateau writing is basically writing on set with actors, like implementing from what we're learning from each other. And then like we wrote what we called handbooks. So the handbooks were practical guides reminding actors and production our process and how to interact in a safe and playful way during the show. In this show there is like no offstage. Everything happens in a single room, which is a dream and a nightmare at the same time. So we needed that timeline document for narrative coordination during the show. We discreetly prompted, we were giving secret cues to the actors, so everything was kind of time-ish, while allowing a big part of trained improvisation and non-anticipated parts of the show. The general rehearsals, we invited a bunch of like different people, game designers, friends who knew about either arts or the themes, and they gave us feedbacks to change like even 2 days before the show. It was crazy for everyone, but we did it. And then showtime, so we had 2 dates to launch that show. So we wanted to have participants to be in the story even before they came into the venue. We had characters waiting in a line outside with them. We had characters arriving that at the party. We had this priming at the entrance. We were giving out feathers to participants for interaction from different colors, and they had all like small roleplay cards that allowed them to feel legitimate to step into the show. They were completely free of movement during the whole show that lasted like from 2 to 3 hours. Interaction was never forced but always offered at all times. And even in the most scenic moments, we tried to avoid as much frontality as we could. And what we saw on these 2 dates from one show to another was how we were able to learn and progress in 2 dates, and that was pretty amazing to see, like, because we changed a lot of things from date 1 to date 2. So anyways, from all these feedbacks and result of these shows, that led us to plan 6 new dates, and due to the epidemic now we have 4 who are cancelled, but we hope to do more. And now that I've talked about the process, Michael put all our methodology in words.
Or at least tried to. So the following is more a study of how I feel we made it, embedded with my own beliefs, rather than real research or framework that we followed. It's really a short overview, and a lot of things will not be considered. We have a specific installation. So please remember, this is not a LARP, so a lot of things will just be very, very obvious for larpers, but it is a production that actually gives jobs, paid jobs, to everyone involved. It's like a dozen persons. So we use these three pillars in what we do, which are seamless narrative, non-heroic participation, and shadowless design. And I will explain the three of them following. So about seamless narrative. So this is blurring the lines. This is actually our personal take on immersive theater's claim to abolish the fourth wall, the wall separating the audience members from the actors, but all of them are participants for us. So the idea for that was to have voices that were really conversational, realistic, let's say. Some participants, some audience participants were mistook for actors participants, and the other way around. There was no moment where someone told you, now the actors are talking, please let them, don't do anything rash. There was nothing like that. So there was really a trial to blur these lines. We'll go back on that afterwards. There is interactivity or influence. So there is no video game feedback like ding, you have influenced the character, or when the conversation made the character steer towards one of the 6 different endings that we created. There was like no clear feedback that it did. There was no like, oh, Zelda Fitzgerald, I think you should leave your abusive husband, and Zelda answering, oh yes, thank you, I will remember that choice. There was nothing like that. Like in life, your influence, negative or positive, has an effect, but it's not always the one you wanted, and it's not always showing right away. And finally, the themes that we talked about, so femininity, masculinity, queerness, toxic relationships, are shown through our contemporary eye, for a contemporary eye. This is what we call a meaningful anachronism, because 1925 was actually a very interesting mirror to show to people from the 2020. Next, non-heroic participation. So the notion of heroism does not seem to send a message that we like, be it in movies, history, or in escape games, or some LARPs. You win, you save the world, you save yourself also. In some immersive theaters, your gaze alone, or your presence alone, or your decisions makes the fate of the characters. We wanted more of an influence, and we wanted to go even further. I was really inspired myself by Bonnie Ruberg idea of de-gamification that she uses to talk about queer games, the queer game culture. So the main conversation mechanic was actually emotional openness. Characters are opening themselves, and they hope the audience will do it also if they feel safe about it. These are also communications about creativity, imposter syndrome, or like mine or yours or yours. You know who you are. Go to nordiclarp.org and see Muriel Algares' take on that. Anyway, this means also a lot of different small things. Actors actually listen to people who didn't speak, listen to people who shared their story. actors and their characters were affected by these stories, by these reactions to their stories, and finally it's kind of an event, so you have to be there to live it. There is nothing to do, to win, to earn, to check or to discover. Just live it. So on equality, about non-heroic participation, equality, of course. So the actors are paid, but this is not the design thing. It's normal. The actors are paid, but the audience is paying. So there is already not an inequality there. In some immersive things, they are put at risk by this inequality sometimes. So blurring the lines, as we mentioned, may help. So audience members get a small role. Actors join the waiting line outside, like you said, without drama, without saying, "Oh, I am an actor," because everybody is a participant here. In any way, people know they have paid, actors know they are being paid, and also actors are trained professionals, and they know how to get attention and charisma. So bit of inequality there, but it's not the same one, right? Eventually, oh, no, that's not. Eventually, shadowless design. So what we call shadowless design is not leaving shadows or overlooked places. We try to include some people that we found are not included in immersive theater most of the time, like an introvert audience, or people who can't stand for very long, or who can't do in a very intense thing. It was not an inclusive event, so it was a conversational experience, so you had to hear, you have to understand some social norms, I think, even if we had some good experiences about that. It's very loud, it's in a small space, it's 60 euros the ticket. Anyway, so about shadowless design, boldness, so heroism, yeah. We did not think you should be favored because you are bold, extrovert, and pushing the other people to get more play or to pay more, to play more. Like Mélanie says, we want to avoid that. We want to avoid the people who behave like in an escape game, but to include them as well if they want, of course. So there are a lot of places to sit down, and actually these places are the ones where there is the most intimate play with the characters. This is where this magic happens. There is no shadow there. So if you sit throughout the whole show, you will be able to get actually a different experience, or maybe better. At least our show is thought to make it better for people who sit through the whole show, or for people who don't want to move. I said it badly, but aside from one place, of course, it's the safe, neutral place at the entrance where people can go if they don't feel well, and they use safety mechanisms, of course. Among these, there is a reflexive decision that you can make before when you are buying the tickets. All the tickets are the same price, of course, but you can choose in advance how much direct interaction you would like to get. So this means you choose one of 3 forms of interactivity. You are given colored feathers, like Mélanie said, for you to wear, and the actors will identify you based on that. And the most interactive tickets or feathers will actually get a passphrase to say to the actors for them to know you are their friends. And it allowed our actors to spontaneously talk rather to people who want direct interaction rather than to people who don't, of course. And safety was, of course, embedded in play, but as many of you know, and there is a lot of resources in the internet, we will not go there, but there was the themes about racism, sexism were actually took into a matter, and people were told about that, and there were several human-powered safety nets. Finally, one word, very quick, that is, all of this was possible because the actors were actually amazing. So we asked them a lot. For some of them, it was their first immersive experience. For others, it was their first performance, actually. We asked them to put aside some of the things that they learned in classical theater or movies or otherwise, because it didn't suit our experience. We asked them to incorporate the character rather than to steer them, to internalize their character arcs, to create meaningful relationships with strangers every night. So what we want to say is that most of this is thanks to them. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this show. And if you have comments to leave, a question to ask, feel free. And we'll answer.
Thank you, and see you in the comments.